passes between the sun and the Earth. In the path of the eclipse, the sun and its rays are completely blocked by the moon. The last total solar eclipse visible from the U.S. took place in 1991, but could only be seen from parts of Hawaii. The 2017 eclipse will start in Oregon and pass over 12 states before exiting in South Carolina. Its path will be 67 miles wide.
If you look to the skies on Monday, August 21st, 2017, you'll see day turn into night. It's not magic, it's science. Better yet, it's called a total solar eclipse, when the moon moves between the Earth and the sun, blocking the light from the sun's surface. Everyone in the continental United States will experience a partial eclipse for about 2 to 3 hours as the moon passes before the sun. The sky won't get nearly as dark as it does for the main event. The catch is, to experience totality, when the moon completely blocks the sun, you have to be within a 60 to 70-mile wide path from Oregon to South Carolina to witness the total eclipse for up to 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so don't blink. Speaking of, looking directly at the sun is unsafe except during the brief phase of totality, according to NASA. Experts recommend getting special-purpose solar filter glasses. Scientists sure are pumped about the stellar event, with a countdown several months out. That's probably because a spectacle like this hasn't been seen from coast to coast across America in 99 years. Coast to coast across America in 99 years.
Under U.S. President Obama's order, members of Russia's diplomatic circles are leaving their sprawling waterfront estate in Maryland. Obama closed the estate for what officials believe was Russian interference in November's election. The president said this compound was used by Russian personnel for intelligence-related purposes. The compound in Glen Cove, New York was also shut down. Something Russia's UN ambassador Vitaly Churkin said was scandalous.
They know full well that those two facilities, which they mentioned in their notes, they're vacation facilities for our kids.
Along the same lines, 35 suspected Russian spies have been expelled by the U.S., many arriving with their families at the Russian embassy in Washington Friday. Russian President Vladimir Putin said he would wait for Donald Trump to come into power before responding. Trump called Putin's reaction on Twitter a great move, saying, "I always knew he was very smart."
U.S. Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham say they're ready to make 2017 a year of offense against Russian President Vladimir Putin. On a visit to U.S. regional ally Georgia, the two Republican defense hawks made clear their position on Russia's alleged efforts to influence the U.S. presidential election.
We hope to make 2017 a year of offense. We believe that Putin has hacked into our elections in America, that he's trying to undermine democracy all over the world, and it's time for new sanctions to hit him hard as an individual, his energy sector, his banking sector.
Russia has denied U.S. accusations of cyber attacks. Putin suggested during his end-of-the-year news conference that the U.S. Democratic Party was trying to blame its election loss on external factors. U.S. President Barack Obama later expelled 35 suspected spies and imposed sanctions on 2 Russian intelligence agencies. McCain and Graham both believe more is needed. On the border with Georgia's breakaway Republic of South Ossetia, McCain urged a strong response.
I believe that we must continue to improve our relations and understand that Vladimir Putin, unless we stand up to him, will continue his aggression, and we must stand up to Vladimir Putin.
Whether the U.S. introduces new measures likely depends on President-elect Donald Trump, who has praised Putin and has shown plans to patch up badly frayed relations with Moscow.
Elect will understand better. I saw where President Putin is not going to retaliate. I think that was a very clever move on his part, but should not change our attitude concerning attacks on the United States of America. There are many sanctions we could take. Financial institutions, for one. Believe it or not, the Russians have a very weak economy. We could do a lot more damage there. Individuals could be sanctioned. Organizations could be sanctioned. There's a wide range of options that we still have, of additional options that could be exercised to respond to a Russian attack. When you attack a country, it's an act of war. And so we have to make sure that there is a price to pay so that we can perhaps persuade the Russians to stop this kind of attacks on our very fundamental.
U.S. sanctions on Russia won't go unanswered, Moscow says. The Kremlin's swift reaction on Friday to Barack Obama's expulsion of 35 suspected Russian spies and his imposition of sanctions on 2 Russian intelligence agencies. Washington accuses them of hacking U.S. political groups to meddle in November's presidential election. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denying that charge. It's a post-Cold War nadir in US-Russian ties, but President Vladimir Putin ruled out retaliating by expelling US diplomats, saying he'll consider the actions of his incoming US counterpart, Donald Trump, before taking action. Many in Trump's Republican Party praised the sanctions, though, calling them long overdue. Trump could face an internal battle if he wants to undo one of the most sweeping acts of Obama's tenure.
I think what makes America great has been our ability to elect leaders through a peaceful, and a transparent process, without fear of rigging or interference in elections. And unfortunately, in this past election, we know that interference occurred. And when I say interference, I want to be specific. It's not about someone physically stuffing ballot boxes or someone hacking our electronic voting machines to give one candidate more votes than the other. It's about selectively and deliberately releasing damaging information in hopes of furthering one's strategic objectives. In this case, Russia's strategic objectives. I believe this is going to happen again unless there is a price to be paid. This interference impacts the foundation of our democracy, our elections, which is why I welcome the sanctions against Russia announced by the President, and why I believe we need to be evaluating additional Russian sanctions. It's simply too important for both parties and for the future of our country. Secretary Letta, given the need for deterrence in this atmosphere, which, as you said, is not always achieved by a cyber response, How important are tools like sanctions to imposing the kind of clear costs that you articulated?
Sanctions are a very useful tool in that toolkit, and I think in the case of the current situation that we find ourselves in, it would be prudent to continue to look at other options to impose more sanctions on Russian actors as the facts continue to develop.
I would agree with that estimate, and I hope that folks on both sides of the aisle will be looking at those additional tools. And I hope that folks on both sides of the aisle will be looking at those additional tools. And I hope that folks on both sides of the aisle will be looking at those additional tools.
Is there a difference between espionage and interfering in an election?
Yes, espionage implies to me at least, a passive.
Yeah, okay.
Passive collection, and this was much more activist.
So when it comes to espionage, we better be careful about throwing rocks. When it comes to interfering in our election, we better be ready to throw rocks. Do you agree with that?
That's a good metaphor.
I think what Obama did was throw a pebble. I'm ready to throw a rock. Would I be justified as a United States Senator taking your information about Russia's involvement in our election and what they're doing throughout the world and be more aggressive than President Obama if I chose to?
That's your choice, Senator.
Do you think he was justified in imposing new sanctions based on what Russia did?
I do.
Okay. So to those of you who want to throw rocks, you're going to get a chance here soon. And if we don't throw rocks, we're going to make a huge mistake. Admiral Rogers, is this going to stop until we make the cost higher?
We have got to change the dynamic here because we're on the wrong end of the cost equation.
Yeah, you got that right. Could it be Republicans' next election?
This is not about parties per se.
Yeah, it's not like we're so much better at cybersecurity than Democrats.
Right.
Now, I don't know what Putin was up to, but I don't remember anything about Trump in the election. Now, if Trump goes after the Iranians, which I hope he will, are they capable of doing this?
They clearly have a range of cyber capability, and they have been willing to go offensively. Both, we've seen that in the United States and the one dam.
So if Trump takes on China, which I hope he will, are they capable of doing this?
Yes.
Okay. So we got a chance as a nation to lay down a marker for all would-be adversaries. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and I'd be the first to acknowledge we need to think about this broadly.
Yeah, and we should take that opportunity before it's too late.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with me that the foundation of democracy is political parties, and when one political party is compromised, all of us are compromised?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, as to what to do, you say you think this was approved at the highest level of government in Russia, generally speaking. Is that right?
That's what we said.
Okay, who's the highest level of government?
Well, the highest is President Putin.
Do you think a lot happens in Russia big that he doesn't know about?
Not very many.
Yeah, I don't think so
Certainly
either.
none that are politically sensitive in another country.
Okay. Now, as we go forward and try to deter this behavior, we're going to need your support now and in the future. So I want to let the President-elect know that it's okay to challenge the intel. You're absolutely right to want to do so. But what I don't want you to do is undermine those who are serving our nation in this arena until you're absolutely sure they need to be undermined. And I think they need to be uplifted, not undermined. North Korea. Let me give you an example of real-world stuff that he's going to have to deal with Trump. Do you believe that North Korea is trying to develop an ICBM to hit the United States, or that could be used to hit the United States?
That could be, yes.
Do you agree with that, Admiral Rogers?
Yes.
So when the North Korean leader says that they're close to getting ICBM, he's probably in the realm of truth?
He's certainly working aggressively to do that.
And if the President of the United States says it won't happen, he's going to have to come to y'all to figure out how far along they are, because you would be his source for how far along they are. Is that right?
I'd hope we'd be
the source.
Yeah, I hope he would talk to you too. And here's what I hope he realizes. That if he has to take action against North Korea, which he may have to do, I intend to support him. But he needs to explain to the American people why. And one of the explanations he'll give is based on what I was told by the people who are in the fight. And let me tell you this. You don't wear uniforms, but you're in the fight. And we're in a fight for our lives. I just got back from the Baltics, Ukraine, and Georgia. If you think it's bad here, you ought to go there. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is time now not to throw pebbles, but to throw rocks. I wish we were not here. If it were up to me, we would all live in peace. But Putin's up to me.
Can't stress it enough. We're facing the real possibility of war against Russia in the next 20 days, before Trump takes over. I don't want to scare anyone, but that's what's happening, unfolding in front of us. It's the leadership, whoever has the levers of power in the United States now, wants to confront Russia aggressively and under threat of military force. The forces have been deployed for better than a year and a half to the borders of Russia, from the Balkans to the Crimean Peninsula, really. And there have been war games ongoing across the front, whether in the Balkans, East Europe, or in the South China Sea. And objectively speaking, if one is looking at American foreign policy as being a rational expression of American interests, war with Russia is insane. Even looking at it from the point of view of the interests of any human being on the planet, regardless of what they might think their interests are, war with Russia is a major catastrophe. Nevertheless, there must be someone at some point inside, at some position inside the elite here that makes policy that sees at least threatening Russia with war and or perhaps moving to war with Russia as a viable strategy, because it's being done openly. The expulsion of 35 diplomats from the United States this past week, unprecedented. They didn't do that during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They didn't do that during the Berlin airlift. They didn't do that at the beginning of the Korean War. This is unprecedented in history, and it comes with these military deployments and the exercises that I mentioned. And it comes also at a time when the American public is being propagandized to hate Russians and Russia and Putin at a higher level, a much more intensive level for sure because of the advances in technology, but at a higher level and at a more absurd level than during the Cold War, during the mid-late 40s and early 50s, the McCarthy era and the time prior and subsequent to. So, the actual policy is being implemented in front of us. I don't know if they're on a clock. Trump said he doesn't want war with Russia. He wants better relations, and part of the narrative here is that Trump owes his presidency to Russian tampering. I don't know what the real game is there, who's on which side, or if it's all just an okey-doke, but it seems that there is an accelerated move towards confrontation with Russia. The most recent thing in today's press being the claim that somehow there's Russian spyware on a Vermont power plant and other power plants around the country, and that somehow Russia is in the position to tamper with our power grid as if this is something that they want to do. I'm very troubled and concerned about this.
time to get rid of outdated cliches. It's time to get rid of prejudices. As far as I understand, for the Philippines, there is an objective need to diversify the range of the circle of your foreign partners. I would like to emphasize that our interest in substantially enhancing our bilateral cooperation with the Philippines is of strategic importance for us.
This former North Korean diplomat who defected, he told our Seoul affiliate that Kim Jong-un is actually becoming more dangerous, more aggressive, than that his plans for nuclear weapons, even if he can't say reach the west coast of the U.S., is in effect first strike, to use them quickly and immediately. Do you find that credible?
Yes, we have historical references from the Kim family suggesting that they would be prepared to use nuclear weapons early in any conflict, so it is a concern.
That would seem to be suicidal, I imagine, right? Because a first use, I imagine, would then bring an overwhelming U.S. and Western response.
Well, but their argument is that if they threaten U.S. cities, if we respond against them, that maybe we'll back off, maybe we'll be timid and not escalate. So they're not sure, especially with the Obama administration, how we are going to act. We have not been clear.
There is the same defector said that Kim Jong-un is eager to take advantage of any uncertainty that might emerge from the transition period between Obama and Trump. Does that sound like a typical Kim Jong-un strategy, something he would take advantage of?
Oh, absolutely. He is very anxious to take advantage anywhere he can. And so President-elect Trump has got to be very ready when he comes in to immediately take some actions.
So what could those actions be? Because successive administrations, Republican and Democrat, they've tried negotiations, they've tried sanctions relief, they've tried economic sanctions, and yet the march towards a nuclear weapon has continued. What can Donald Trump do differently that would be effective?
Well, there are a variety of things that he could try to do. Deterrence is about convincing the other side that he's not going to get the benefits he expects. You could do that by threatening to shoot down North Korean missiles that are tested. They violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions. That would be something President-elect Trump could say, I'm not going to let you have any successes with your missile tests. Don't do them or you won't have a success. He could also take anti-North Korea regime information operations, telling the North Korean people the way things really are in ways that our government has not been prepared to do in the past.
Is it also possible that the U.S. or Donald Trump could order a military strike on North Korean nuclear facilities?
Interestingly, in 2006, we had an op-ed from former Secretary of Defense William Perry and the current Secretary of Defense Ash Carter saying that we should do exactly that if we saw an ICBM on a launch pad. So it is conceivable, but the problem is if we were to do that, North Korea would likely open up artillery fire on Seoul or some such threat.
Right, and Seoul with millions of residents and also tens of thousands of U.S. forces there. Donald Trump, on the campaign trail at least, suggested the idea of giving nuclear arms to U.S. allies in the region, South Korea and Japan. How would that change the dynamic?
I don't think we want to do that. I don't think that's in U.S. interest. In fact, I seem to see him backing away from that statement. The problem is, if for them to have nuclear weapons, they would have to leave the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. If they do, that treaty is largely dead, and that treaty has been the hallmark of U.S. non-proliferation policy. Moreover, if South Korea and Japan had nuclear weapons, they may well start a nuclear arms race in the region with China, and that is something we don't want to have happen.
Enormous consequences.
A high-level North Korean defector says Kim Jong-un is determined to complete development of nuclear weapons within a year, putting the North Korean nuclear threat front and center for Donald Trump.
My country.
The one-time deputy ambassador giving rare insight into the reclusive regime and saying he doesn't regret his defection.
Everyone in my family, thinks that it is the right decision.
The South Korean Yonhap news agency quotes the diplomat as saying Kim, at all costs, will try to have working nuclear weapons by the end of 2017. Traditional economic and financial concessions may no longer work. Kim may no longer be interested in money or aid.
It's not a question of being able to buy them off. This is part of the regime. They feel that it's necessary for survival. They're not going to give it up until the regime is on the verge of failure.
Indeed, sanctions have not deterred Kim. The top U.S. intelligence official acknowledges U.S. options are limited.
I think the notion of getting the North Koreans to denuclearize is probably a lost cause.
The U.S. intelligence community believes Kim will continue to test his missiles and conduct more underground nuclear tests, all aimed at having a working nuclear weapons system. But it's not a slam dunk that he can make it all happen by next year.
North Korea's ballistic missile program has a long way to go, but they've already got 3 launchers that can hit the lower 48 states.
Intelligence analysts say, however, North Korea has yet to perfect the technology that makes the missile, after it's fired, re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
President-elect Donald Trump responded to North Korea's nuclear threat with a tweet. It won't happen. In a New Year's Day speech, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un claimed the country was on the verge of testing an intercontinental ballistic missile. Evidence shows North Korea can make intermediate missiles that will reach South Korea, Japan, and even as far as Guam. However, they've had little success testing these missiles, and some experts are still skeptical the country could mount a nuclear warhead on a missile. If North Korea has miniaturized its nuclear bombs and has a successful test flight of its first ICBM, the risk of a nuclear attack on the U.S. becomes all too real. Since at least the 1980s, North Korea has used the threat of nuclear proliferation and attack as a bargaining chip to reduce the economic sanctions other countries have imposed because of its nuclear program or to secure international aid. That strategy against a Trump administration may not bode well for Kim. Trump called out China, one of North Korea's only allies, for not putting